I didn't expect to stop something that once felt so important to me. It used to give me a sense of control over my days. But slowly, that feeling began to change. I wasn't giving up. At least, that's what I told myself. It just felt like a quiet kind of exhaustion I couldn't explain. The kind that builds without being seen. Every day I wrote everything down without missing a detail. Even the smallest expenses felt like they mattered too much. It became a habit I didn't question anymore. Then one day, something about it started to feel different. It was as if I was watching myself too closely, and that awareness didn't feel kind anymore. Maybe the issue was never the habit itself. Maybe it was the way I held on to it too tightly, and I'm only just beginning to see that now. My name is Clara. I'm a mother, still learning how to live more consciously each day. Back then, I believed tracking everything would give me clarity. Every morning, I opened my expense notes. I wrote down everything I spent the day before. It felt like a small ritual I could rely on. Seeing those numbers made me feel calmer. It was as if everything stayed within my control. That sense of order gave me comfort. Over time, I began to enjoy it. Writing things down became part of my day. It quietly settled into my routine. But slowly, something shifted. The habit didn't feel as light anymore. It started to hold me in place. When I forgot to write something down, I felt uneasy. A small thing, but it stayed in my mind, as if I had missed something important. Without realizing it, something changed. What once helped me started to feel heavier. It no longer felt like support. I kept doing it anyway, but the feeling had changed. It was no longer calm, but something I carried with pressure. I started noticing how I felt each time I wrote things down. It wasn't about the numbers anymore. It was about the quiet tension that came with them. Small expenses began to feel heavier than they were. Even simple things started to carry a sense of doubt. I found myself quietly questioning normal choices. I hesitated over small decisions, not because I couldn't afford them, but because I didn't want them to look wrong later. Slowly, I noticed how rigid I had become. Everything needed to match what I wrote. There was no space to adjust anymore. It left me feeling drained in a quiet way. Not something visible from the outside, but something I carried through the day. I began to question what I was really doing. Was this helping me feel better? Or was it just another way to stay in control? The more I tried to do everything right, the more I felt something was missing. It didn't feel like freedom anymore. And somewhere in that realization, a quiet thought began to form. Something I had never allowed myself to consider before. The thought came quietly, without warning. What if I stopped tracking everything? It felt small, but unsettling. The thought came quietly, without warning. What if I stopped tracking everything? It felt small, but unsettling. Those notes had been my anchor for so long. Letting go felt like drifting without direction, like walking without a map. I sat there longer than usual, looking at the notebook in front of me. It felt familiar, but heavy somehow. Part of me wanted to continue, because it still felt safe in a way, even if it quietly drained me. Another part began to speak more honestly. I wasn't happy doing this anymore, and that truth felt important. I realized this wasn't about right or wrong. It was about what felt healthy for me, and for my family too. For the first time, I considered something different, not out of fear, but care. Choosing myself felt unfamiliar, but gentle. I began to see things more clearly. Control didn't have to come from tracking everything. It could come from simply being aware. I realized I didn't need to know every number. Responsibility wasn't about constant checking. It felt quieter than that. I used to think discipline meant being strict, but maybe it could also mean being flexible. As long as I stayed aware, then something simple became clear. I didn't want to feel watched all the time, not even by myself. I wanted a life that felt lighter, but still had direction, without losing my sense of control. And maybe the answer wasn't tracking more. Maybe it was understanding more deeply. In that moment, I understood something. I didn't have to stop caring. I just needed to change how I cared. And that gave me a sense of calm, because I finally found a middle ground, something that felt like me. That day, I didn't open my notes. It felt unfamiliar, almost like skipping something important. I noticed the silence it left behind. I moved through the day as usual, cooking, tidying, taking care of small things, but I left everything unwritten. At first, I felt a quiet discomfort, like something was missing from the rhythm. A small unease followed me. I reminded myself to stay present, to notice what I was doing without recording it, just letting the moment exist. I began noticing small habits more clearly, without labeling them as right or wrong, just observing them as they were. Slowly, the anxiety softened. It didn't disappear all at once, but it no longer held the same weight. I realized I hadn't lost control. I had simply loosened my grip, and that felt more balanced. By the end of the day, I felt lighter. Not because everything was perfect, but because I wasn't carrying it the same way. I started to notice a quiet shift in myself. The need to control every detail began to feel heavier than helpful. Even the good habits carried a weight I hadn't seen before. I used to think discipline meant pushing myself harder, but now I see it asks for understanding, not pressure. There's a softer way to stay consistent. Letting go didn't make me lost like I feared. It made me more present in each moment. I could finally feel what I was doing. Numbers stopped being the center of my attention. I began to notice my habits instead. And somehow, that felt more real. Small things started to feel different. Not like tasks I had to complete, but like choices I was allowed to make. My days began to move at a different pace. Quieter, but not empty. More honest in a way I hadn't expected. I still have imperfect days, but I no longer fight them the same way. There's more peace in how I respond. I'm beginning to trust this balance. Not perfect, not extreme, just enough to feel steady again. I used to believe that more control meant better outcomes. It felt responsible to track every detail, like that was the only way to stay on track. But over time, something felt off. The more I tried to control everything, the less I actually felt it, like I was present but not really there. I started to realize that not everything needs to be recorded. Not every moment needs to be measured. Some things are enough just being noticed. I allowed myself to choose a lighter way. Not careless, just less rigid. And somehow, it still felt enough. I also stopped comparing how I manage things with others. There isn't just one right way, and it doesn't have to look perfect. What matters more is balance. Knowing when to hold on and when to let go. Somewhere between discipline and feeling. Maybe that's what I was looking for all along. Not control, but connection. Something quieter, but more real. It's not about having a perfect life. It's about a life that feels enough. And finally, mine does. That day, I didn't write anything down. The page stayed blank, but my mind felt clearer. I began noticing things I usually overlooked. I still took care of what needed to be done. The rhythm of the day continued as usual. But this time, I stayed more present in each moment. I don't know if I'll always do things this way. Some days might feel different again. But right now, I understand myself a little more. If you've ever felt this kind of quiet exhaustion, maybe nothing is wrong with you. Maybe you just need a softer way to hold your days. And if you want to learn slowly, there's always space to begin again. We don't have to rush through this.